So, Sebastian, we heard a lot about what you are doing, but maybe Dietrich and Eduard, could you give a brief introduction in what you are doing?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm Dietrich Sümmermann. I'm the CEO of a small boutique, EMobility, which is focused on solving the issue of interoperability in the mobility sector. That sounds not very sex appealing, but it's one of the most crucial challenges from our view for the future. So how to bridge technically, but also organizationally, the gaps between all the mobility companies which need to collaborate in order to build a seamless customer experience. And one of our projects is OMOS, Open Mobility System, rather in a concept state with various automotives, Deutsche Bahn, Fraunhofer Institute, where we exactly look into how can we bridge these gaps with distributed ledger technology, basically blockchain technology. And our biggest project and most beloved baby is Share&Charge, which is solving the interoperability issue for electric mobility. So with basically with blockchain and peer-to-peer communication technology, we bridge the gap between charge point and electric vehicle. For that, we set up also Share&Charge Foundation to build an open ecosystem and have some open source frameworks which can be used by all the partners.
Thank you. So I'm Edward. I'm co-founder of emonvia. emonvia is a Munich-based company for digital EV charging solutions as well. So we are not focusing on the communication between the charger and the car, but between the charger and everything that is in the background somehow. We are focused on companies because we see like big fleets and private cars parking at the companies is a very big market for all of us. And so some brief words about our background as well. We were just founded last year. We have 3 investors on board. We saw that the 3 main challenges are the charging infrastructure, are the electricity somehow, so that's something we're talking about as well probably, and the building digital products and digital business models. So we have Manya on board. I think all of you know Manya probably, a Munich-based company builder, and a utility and a producer of charging infrastructure too.
So, do we actually have someone in the audience who is driving an electric car?
Oh,
okay. So, yeah, I think infrastructure developed quite good in the last couple of years, especially if we look at Munich. We have charging spots at every street corner, at least in the city center. But it took a while. If we look at cities like Amsterdam or Copenhagen, they have been at that state maybe 5 years ago. Why is it so difficult? I've just been to San Francisco, and like every second car is a Tesla. In Munich, they are still quite rare. Why is it so difficult for us Germans to leave our traditional cars behind?
Maybe I'm just quickly starting, not talking about the cars, but talking about public infrastructure. So I think I've been to Norway for a year and I saw many companies adopting. So I'm driving an electric car too, and not a Tesla. So one of the cars with the small batteries, and we cannot charge that quickly. And since we have chargers in our company, it's quite easy for me to go everywhere. And everybody, I'm actually giving my car to everybody who wants to, and all of them it's quite easy actually, because they were all feared of going back home and not being able to charge. And I think the idea of investing a lot of money into public infrastructure and setting up poles all over the city, it's not actually solving the problem. And we have just to stop that or to finish that, we have a big customer, and we have just launched our EV charging infrastructure there, and they were at 10, so they have 15,000 employees, and they had 10 EVs in December, and they now have 40 charging there, because everybody's seeing that the company is allowing them to charge for quite a cheap price.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are at a tipping point now in Germany to take it positive. I think now it will increase exponentially, coming from a very low level, obviously. I think we all know the reasons. It was a little bit of subsidies, and so basically coming to a cost question, which is now solved in Germany to some extent, also with a company car solution now and with a lower tax rate. As always with new cars, it will come from the company car side. So more than 70% comes from company cars. With EV, perhaps even more, because companies will now switch out of corporate responsibility reasons to electric vehicles. So we will see now a whole wave of electric vehicles coming to Germany. So I wouldn't say it's not so important to look back what went wrong, but now to get it done. And it will come. Also, all this argument missing public charging infrastructure. Also there's a lot happening now on the motorways with Ionity, for example, with the joint venture of the automotives. And I fully agree that most of the charging anyhow will happen at your company or at home. So 90% probably. So we don't need that much of public charging infrastructure to make this mobility revolution happen. And what I now see, or what will happen in the next month, although that obviously now electric vehicles will become the new status symbol. That's why I'm also very confident on the company car side. So it will be quite sexy, and to show off with a cool electric vehicle, with a e-tron or whatsoever. Kind of that will become the new status symbol in the next years. And then I think that will even increase adoption for the also mass market.
And I want to just jump into what you've said at the end. Is what I believe is that why we didn't pick up, and that's the only thing about the past, is because we still like driving European cars, and there was just nothing that we had as a challenging a Tesla, as you have given that example. And we like our brands, we like the cars of German and European car manufacturers, and what they offered us so far was not appealing enough. And that's changing now. We see a lot of cars coming up or are already on the market now. The big discussions that we always have on a tipping point of new technologies is things that now come up of the lithium technology or lithium resource topic, or the other thing from infrastructure, reach, and how many kilometers do I want to drive. All that is normal and standard when it comes to new technology. Remember back when we had first seatbelts, people were telling us that seatbelts are killing more than they save lives. Same for airbags. All those technologies we don't question anymore. And yes, there will be changes, and probably a lot of changes still when it comes to electric drive as well. But what I personally, at least, and I think I'm not alone, strongly believing that it is coming and the tipping point is reached, and we're gonna see so many things. And then if we are questioning ourselves, especially about charging infrastructure and reach, all the negativity that we do have is just the one time we go on holiday, hopefully to Austrian Alps a year. And the rest of the time when driving in Munich, you are approximately driving 25, 30 kilometers a day. So there are studies that this is around 90% of your daily commute, or the daily drive of all cars within a town is below 30 kilometers. And seeing that, as you said, home and company charging is what you need. Of course, some people who are curbside parkers in streets and some towns don't have home as your garage, so it needs to be, public charging needs to be resolved, but we are getting there, and things are picking up. Still, what we believe is that there could be more incentives, as well as more structure in a process of rolling things out. What we currently see are initiatives of different players in the market. especially when it comes to infrastructure. But there at least seems not yet to be a strategy behind how to really resolve an issue like that. But it's coming.
Maybe one more question to you, Sebastian. What do you tell people that tell you that e-mobility is just not sustainable from a production point of view? If you look at batteries and their lifetime and those arguments, what do you tell those people?
So first of all, if you look at really profound studies, it's the lifetime. So the lifetime energy or resource demand that an electric car today uses is already better than compared to an ICE, internal combustion engine. So meaning we are already in that small scale of a market not worse than a standard car. But yes, there are problems. There are things that we should not neglect. We shouldn't say the resource of lithium is something, who cares, it's somewhere else in the world. Yes, that is a sustainability topic, and we need technology innovation in terms of how to reduce the amounts that we need, find subsidiary materials that can help us to overcome a resource restriction. But we are already more sustainable with electric cars compared to internal combustion engines. Another quick comment on electrified driving is not just battery-driven driving. So what we're gonna see in non too distant future is a lot of other propulsion systems like fuel cells who are producing the energy. It's not just the battery. There are going to be new battery technologies that are, as I said before, using other resources and help us to be more sustainable on the resource side. But there's also going to come other or additional energy creation methodologies that still drive cars electric, because at the end, electricity will drive the wheels.
We are talking a lot about like individual cars for like families or single persons, but what about buses and like urban mobility at a bigger scale when it comes to e-mobility? Are we going to see more electric buses and stuff like that as well?
May I quickly give a comment and then hand over to you? So definitely. So, and it's already there. Not here. Here, in Central Europe, things are picking up, as always, a little slower. But you just need to look at other cities and for instance, take a look at Singapore. They already electrified their whole fleet, and this is a 6 million inhabitants town. So they are electrifying like hell on buses, on public transport. So this is even simpler. Why? Because you know the routes, you know you can better predict what is needed. And whenever your commute, your drive is predictable, you can define and develop technologies exactly for that. So I think that that's for electrification, but also for autonomy, we'll have that much quicker in public transport than in personal transport as in our car-driven personal drives.
By the way, I think Munich bought like 40 electric buses now. Just yeah.
Yeah, so fully agree.
For that small percentage of long distance rides, what can we do to like people to convince people to somehow maybe also change their habits? Because if you drive a traditional car, you still do brakes on like 600 kilometers drives. You will have a coffee break somehow, or some break to get some food or something like that. So how can we educate people to maybe see those charging breaks a bit different, and maybe even as some kind of advantage to. I just recently talked to Richard Gutjahr, who is the co-founder of eMobility, a German blog about e-mobility, and he told me that since he has an electric car, he is more relaxed when he's driving because he knows he has to do a 30-minute break somehow, and then he just plans more time for his ride, and then he's totally relaxed when he's arriving. So maybe we have to also change our habits on those long distance rides. What do you think?
I think it's a challenging approach as a company if you want to change your customers' behavior. Anyhow, I think first of all, in this EV, everybody then talks about long distance and how problematic it is. I think we need to start with how great driving experience is normally in 98% of the cases. It's kind of a super acceleration, it's not so loud, etc. You can charge at home, you don't need to drive to fuel stations anymore, etc. So it's a very good experience. And then there's this last 2% for the long distances. If you're traveling long distances in a constant manner, you probably better do not buy an electric vehicle the next 5 years. But if it is like once a month, once every quarter, there will be solutions, or there are first solutions with fast charging, where within 25 minutes you get your car basically to 80% again. In 25 minutes, that's a coffee, going to the bathroom, walking around the car with your child 2 times, and then you can drive along. So I think there is not so much to change. Obviously, there are a lot of ideas on how to make the charging experience even more convenient, with screens in the charging stations, etc. With like point of interest where you could go have a look around in cities, etc. In the end, I think especially on the motorways, we'll have fast charging, 25 minutes, and that's not much of a time compared to current fueling.
So as long as the fast charging is actually fast, it's quite nice. So my first car was charging 20 kilowatts DC, 30 kilowatt, which is quite slow actually. And we were going to Austria, and it took us 5 breaks of an hour, which was not too nice. But I think we're doing. It's getting quite awesome at the moment, because the chargers get better. There are more chargers and the cars as well. And what everybody's always forgetting as well, every time you go on a trip with your electric car, you have a full charged battery, ideally. So it's not like starting and having a first break after 20 minutes, but you can always kind of prepare. And I see it when visiting customers, I usually just check if there is an AC charger somewhere around. I'm charging them there, and I'm going back home, and ideally I do not even have to charge it at the highway. So it's like you have to plan trips better, but it's possible. And I think every hotel, every restaurant, every company will charge in the future.
I do have an additional, totally different answer to your question, because we just need to look at what's Germans, or one of Germany's most successful startups in mobility. That's Flixbus, and I think that what we see is that future generations see mobility different as possibly we do. Namely, that it's not about driving to that destination, which is a few hundred kilometers away, with your own car alone. You could simply use another mobility concept and combine that with the mobility concept that you use on your day-to-day basis when you commute from your maybe suburb to the city center where you work. And I think that shift of generations' demands of how we use mobility is gonna be even easier resolving those problems as we, and I'm calling myself already the older generation, is looking at it.
If you look at those big companies, those big corporations that have those enormous car fleets, what can we do to convince them to change to e-mobility to choose more electric cars in the end for their employees. So what can we do? What are the advantages for big corporations to take electric cars in the end?
I think it's about efficiency, but for big companies, it's always about cost somehow. And looking at pool cars, so a pool car, so every company that is controlling its costs, or its pool cars costs, will see that electric cars are just cheaper. So the buying a Tesla is like very expensive from the beginning, but there will be cars that are not that expensive anymore. And just controlling it and showing it to the management board after a year or two, everybody will be convinced. And but there is still a lot of like company cars, and I think this new taxation of just having 0.5%, it's a pull from the employees because they can buy a bigger car and they have to pay less tax. So I think it's quite amazing already. And looking at Norway and the Netherlands, you see that this was like the point when everything changed, when they did these taxations for company cars.
Yeah, again, fully agree. I think now there will be this pull. That was a game changer with 0.5%. I think we will have supply bottleneck on many of these cars. I mean, if you now order a car and it takes you 1 year that you get it delivered, that's not a very nice customer experience. But it shows that the market now really gains traction.
And what I want to add is the taxation in Austria, even it's 0%. So in Austria, you don't pay anything if you're driving electric as a company car, as the employee. The other thing, and I think it's gonna be, and perhaps I'm not making friends with saying that, I think it's gonna be legislation that helps us, not just in supporting it by giving you tax returns, but also in restricting it. Especially in Germany, there are a lot of cities who tackle heavy problems in emissions, and emissions could be reduced. It's not the sole solution. It's not the sole solution by banning diesel or petrol cars, but it is something which should be and could be considered, so that a technology change is forced. It's the same when seatbelts, again, the example, needed to be used. It was law. Otherwise, people may have not done that. It's helmet with motorcycles, where we have seen that, and so on and so forth. So legislation can be a reason, can be a solution, but and that's what, again, not doing it just because of the industry change. So it shouldn't be something that is populistic or where we don't see a real reason behind it. It needs to be used in situations where it's really helping. These are not just simple to find, and it shouldn't be a diesel ban within all major cities. But combining legislation with refunding is, I guess, needed to increase the speed of adaptation.
I want to add one thing a little bit. I'm very positive about electric mobility, as you've heard, obviously, and the adoption. Just to tackle two challenges, and these are perhaps not super obvious. And one is, I'm coming from the energy world, so I used to work for large energy companies, and what we see is obviously this convergence of the mobility and the energy ecosystem. And it seems quite obvious that they need to work closely together, because the cars will become kind of a fundamental storage and a part of the energy system in the future. But it's kind of that takes really time and understanding from both sides, and very practically, like BMW needs to talk to Energy, and these are like two companies already which have sometimes problems to have good communication internally, and then even to talk to other companies. So what we will see is there is a risk of overload of the grids, of the local power grids. If we all get like 11 or 22 kilowatt home charges, and we all charge when coming home at 6 o'clock, this will be a challenge. And that is also what we see already in Austria. For example, in some parts, especially the ski resorts, where all the Dutch people are driving and want to charge at the same time. And that may happen here quicker than we currently think. And that's kind of my fear, that the grid operators are, by its nature, quite slow. They are not super innovative because their reason to exist is to run stable power grids without any outages. And it's not that they are super dynamic by their DNA, but they need to adapt now very quickly to exponential growth of electric mobility. And I foresee that there may be a huge challenge kind of in 3 to 5 years, where we see that the grid operators do not allow you to install a home charger anymore, or like just home chargers with maximum 3.7 kilowatt, for example. And the second challenge is joint digital infrastructure. That's obviously, again, not very appealing and not very sexy, but we still have massive challenges on the digital infrastructure. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar euro industry, but still there's only a handful of people really understanding the current standards in the EV charging ecosystem. And there are so many still open points. And if you like, you always meet the same 5 people in these kind of standard discussions. And that's quite amazing to see that, like, we now talk about millions of cars coming into the German market and hundreds of millions globally, but we still lacking somehow standards and a joint common digital infrastructure for EV charging. So these are kind of also, just to mention them, I think 2 challenges in this whole e-mobility domain.
May I quickly refer to those challenges, because what that also combines or resonates with what I was talking about in my presentation before is I think those challenges are obviously there, and I fully see them as a major objective that we need to be able to resolve. And how we do that is simply by, again, collaboration. That's what I wanted to say, because what I've seen, I've also been founding and been heading an energy infrastructure startup, where we've been at that centerpiece between the automotive world and the infrastructure world. And it's still a fight who's going to be taking over that interesting market of selling propulsion power. It is electric power, so it may be the grid providers or the electric utilities, but it's also propulsion, so it may be the automotive guys. So who's taking that business at the end? Currently, it's kind of a fight, and who's being faster, and it's not so collaborative. But on the other hand, you need to be working together, because those are so different industries, and if you don't align, you're gonna not be able to find solutions on it, and it's gonna be a tough challenge. And that tough challenge, again, collaboration is the key.
And now it's becoming interesting, because I mean, easy collaboration in this context, at least, is obviously not given, because, as you said, Volkswagen now has founded Elli. Some of you may have heard, kind of their new company where they basically want to offer all charging services, and they started to sell energy. So they are 100% now competitor of Innogy, for example, who are charge point operator and energy provider. And so these 2 companies now need to cooperate on the one hand, but on the other, they are 100% fundamental competitors. And that's obviously not an easy environment to find a trustful platform for cooperation. So I think that's the exciting challenge in the next years, on how do we get cooperation done on the one hand, on the other, but also good competition, which obviously in the end helps the customers. And for us as a startup, and it may be the same with you, it's another challenge, obviously, of cooperating with large corporates. That's a different story where we could discuss like for hours, but have an efficient cooperation with large automotives is quite a challenge, I would say.
Okay, so we have a lot of topics. You will be around for a bit more time, so maybe if you have questions directly to them, reach out to them, maybe also in the lunch break. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, so now we are heading over to